We're in an RV today. We're making do. And every time my dog does that, we're going to have an earthquake. Anyway, so we're up on tires. Everything is going to shake. My name is Shane Brodie. I'm traveling around the country talking to trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming, intersex, etc. people who are adjacent to the trans community, people who are allies, some parents and kids, which is pretty great. And today we're in Kansas City, and we're kind of in an industrial area out here, and it's kind of in the boonies, and I kind of liked it. It's like the forest and the rivers, and then kind of heavy industry all of a sudden. It's interesting out here. I used to ride freight trains when I was younger, so I'm very familiar with these kind of areas, out by the rail yards and stuff. Anyway, so I'm here with a guest today, and they. We talked about your pronouns, and we can get into that in a moment. If you could introduce yourself, that would be great.
Sure thing.
Yeah.
So my name is Leah Jolivet. I use she and they pronouns currently.
Yes. And you said you don't have really a preference between them.
I struggle with that sometimes. I feel like I have been more okay with any pronouns, but I feel obligated to use she, just because that's what I grew up with.
You feel obligated?
Yeah, a bit. And then I worry that if I say, okay, hey, I use she, they, or like, please use they, them pronouns for me, I'm gonna get my feelings hurt when people don't.
Okay.
Especially since I don't mind using she, her pronouns.
Okay.
I get a bit of like, oh, this person respects me enough because they're using they pronouns, or like I get a sense of like satisfaction of like, oh, that's really kind of them or very sweet of them to do this. But I worry that if I try to enforce it, it's gonna be, it's not gonna work for me. And I'm not ready to set myself up for that failure yet.
Okay. Oh, okay, yeah, and it's interesting that you say that because. That sort of thing, even though it seems superficial, like pronouns and stuff, it can be like deeply hurtful, especially if it happens kind of all the time. People call that like microaggressions sometimes. Yeah. For myself, sometimes I go by he and sometimes they recently. I worry about using they actually in the way that sometimes I'm wondering if people will use they instead of he as to disrespect me.
Yes, that's really common.
Yeah, so it's kind of like we're both dealing with this kind of thing around pronouns, around disrespect, and what kind of vulnerability we want in the world. Yeah.
The way I think about it is if I'm in a situation where I use she, her pronouns, I can't set myself up for being disappointed because I'm like, oh, they don't know that I use other things, or they don't know to like ask. So I'm just gonna like default. But also I grew up in the deep South, so there wasn't a lot of space for any other gender.
Right. And they use a lot of honorifics.
Yes.
And other words that are very gendered, like honey and darling. And
yes. And I personally use a lot of those terms as well.
Yeah.
And so it's really weird, especially growing up and moving here, where I have to remind myself not to say ma'am or sir, and I do it like from a place of comfort and from love and respect. And when people get uncomfortable, I'm like, oh my goodness, I was trying to avoid making you uncomfortable. That's why I'm using sir and ma'am. Right. And yeah, I'm moving more towards shug to try and be like a more gender neutral term. I call people shug instead of hun.
Like sugar.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay.
And
where were you living before?
Oh, I'm from Lafayette, Louisiana.
Okay.
It's probably like 2 hours from New Orleans.
Okay.
It's part of the Acadiana region.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I know nothing about that. So if you could describe that.
Oh, so I could talk about Lafayette all day.
Sure. Well,
not all day.
I actually have 3 interviews today.
Okay, so I'll
you're
keep
number 2.
I'll keep it succinct. Lafayette is a very rich cultural region of Louisiana, and we like to say that we're not like other Southerners because we have that rich history of the Cajuns and the Creoles. So the Cajun heritage is long-standing. It's a lot of history, and it's French dialect.
Right.
And
your
Nova
French,
Scotia.
Your name is derived from French.
Yes. My full name is Leonoko Jolivet.
Okay.
But that's a bit much. I just go by Leah Jolivet.
Yeah.
It seems a little.
It sounds really cool.
Yes. So there's a lot of like history, and I come from a place where we have festivals and feijoados and
lots of music and food
lots of
and
like Zydeco music, a lot of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, so why did you move to the Kansas City region?
I really just wanted to get out of Louisiana for a bit. I grew up in the house that my great grandfather built.
Okay.
I know everyone in my city. Everyone knows me from like being a 12-year-old, or maybe they're related to me. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And so I wanted something different.
Okay.
Especially, I struggled in Lafayette. Although it's considered like more of a bigger city, we're surrounded by more rural areas.
Okay.
And Lafayette's pretty, quote unquote, progressive. Considering what it's around, but whenever we had the chance to like make it more progressive, I was really involved in like student orgs or like community activism.
Is there a university there?
Yes, University of Louisiana.
Okay.
And we actually made national news because we were one of the first with the drag show Storytime, like big debacle.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and we had protesters coming in from out of state, and it was some of my friends from the university. Delta Lambda Phi was the fraternity trying to put it on, and
So this is on a university campus, and you have people coming in to cause trouble.
Yeah, well, they were trying to do it in the public life. There was a university, and they were like, oh, for our philanthropy, we have to do a philanthropy each year. We're going to, like, do this event to read to children at the public library.
Yeah.
Because that gave them a space, and that way we could use, there was no, like, funding we needed.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we'd have to rent a space.
Yeah.
And
that's a community building event.
Yes.
Yes.
Long story short, it was a mess. To the point where now our library is being defunded. Our city, like...
What?
Oh, yeah, it's a huge thing.
I haven't heard about that.
So, they basically ended up making, like, a library, like, committee board, but it's not from librarians. It's, like, appointed by the mayor-president, and who also is not the greatest man.
Okay.
So
the funding for the library is
starting to get cut.
It's controlled by the politicians in the area, and they have chosen to defund it.
Yes.
Wow.
And there's a lot of...
And that affects everybody.
Oh, yeah, tremendously. And there's a lot of discussions on, like, basically... They're trying to ban a lot of the books in the libraries, and we felt like this all stemmed from this drag show Storytime because a lot of people supported it. A lot of people who did support it lost their jobs.
Oh.
A lot of librarians who wanted to fight back who said, oh no, okay, well, now we've moved to banning books. Well, we're not going to do a queer, like, book display. We're going to do a book of love display. And it happened to be that 2 or 3 of these books were queer novels, and they basically cited her for, like, disobedience or, like, something like that. I don't remember the, like, specifics.
So did they change the rules at the library?
Yes.
To ban queer books and then...
Queer displays.
And then a librarian chose, because being queer is part of the spectrum of identities and sexualities out there, to include a couple of books, and that person was fired.
Yes.
Whoa. That is hardcore.
It became like a long-term thing. I did an interview right before I left Louisiana for Pride, and basically I said that, you know, queer people in Lafayette deserve to feel loved and recognized and feel safe.
So it sounds like you were an activist there.
Yes.
Would you describe yourself as that?
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And around what kind of issues?
So I was a member of Gamma Rho Lambda, which is a LGBT support sorority. You might actually have to look up the full description.
I could put a link to it.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. And then I was the president of GLASS, which was giving love, safety, and support. Acceptance, safety, and support, something like that.
Okay. And these are university-based ones? Okay.
And then we had PFLAG, which was Lafayette-based, and I did some volunteer work with them.
And that's national?
Yes. But besides that, we also had Louisiana Trans Advocates.
Okay.
So I used to date somebody who was really big into the org, and so I did some volunteer work with them, but not too much.
Yeah.
I feel like because I am still questioning my gender and where I fall, I don't want to take up too much space in trans-based issues where, you know, there are already people doing great work. I don't need to be, like, the focal point of that.
Yeah. So it seems like you're part of the trans community, and you're also somewhat adjacent, like as an ally. How do you negotiate that?
So I
Because there are some issues,
Yes.
like you just brought up.
So
Yeah.
I know that I'm queer. This
Yeah.
has been something that I've known early on, and I came out in high school. So
Yeah.
this wasn't like a huge, like, focal point for me.
Sure.
And then my blackness really affected my queerness for
Yeah.
a long time, especially in the Deep South, on where,
Yeah.
like, I felt safe and where I felt comfortable.
Right.
And then when it started coming to, like, transness, I don't feel like I can identify as trans.
Okay.
I think I might not be cis, but I don't feel like, this is going to sound really silly, I don't feel like I've earned the title of transness.
Okay. How about non-binary? Does that fit at all? Or gender fluid, gender queer?
Maybe like gender diverse.
Okay,
or
gender diverse, okay.
Gender non-conforming, because
Sure.
I feel like those are more adjectives rather than like nouns, if
Okay.
that makes sense.
Sure.
Um,
Less concrete or...
Yes.
Okay.
because I'm also really worried about taking up space in the community that maybe isn't for me.
Okay. But also, I mean, there's an issue where, the trans community is really, really small. So we need as many allies helping us as possible. So the issue of taking up space, I don't know about that. Like, I would want to welcome as many people as possible. But that's just me.
That's fair. I definitely do work with like volunteering and like doing ally work where I can.
Yeah.
But more of like speaking on these issues. I feel like although I might be educated in like the facts, I feel like my experience with gender is not everyone else's.
Sure.
And it has a lot to do with like gender roles in the Deep South and like misogyny and
And all of that is completely valid too.
yeah.
And it's been going on forever.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So, how's Kansas City different for you? I'm imagining socially it's very different.
Yes.
Yeah.
Socially it's very different.
There's less of the music and,
I joke that the biggest culture shock I had
Yeah.
was when I went to walk a friend to her Uber outside of a bar, and the
Okay.
bartender wouldn't let me bring my drink outside. And
okay.
I was like, it's not glass. And we got in kind of an argument for a bit because I
Sure.
was like, no, it's not glass. And he was like, you can't bring it outside. And I was like,
Right.
well, give me the cup.
Right.
Back home, like, as long as it's not glass, you can walk out of the bar
Right.
with it. So I was very confused why I couldn't have my
Sure.
my alcohol
Yeah,
outside.
I know. Well, don't go up to the northern states because, you can't even, buy any liquor on Sunday.
That was the biggest thing that like made me kind of laugh. I feel like Kansas City has a lot going on, and so
Yeah.
I like being able to be involved. Like
It's
today,
vibrant. It's very vibrant here.
Yeah, like today later on, there's a trans joy picnic that we're going to
Okay.
go to at 5:00.
Great.
So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah.
I feel like the community can be a little hard at times to like get into, and maybe that's just like because I'm kind of more of an outsider coming in, whereas back home, I was there for 20 something years. I was able to like really develop a very
I
strong
see.
queer community.
I see. But you're also moving from a smaller town to quite a large city.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that jump is hard for anybody. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's hard to feel like when I first moved up here, I stayed in the closet.
Okay.
Because I was just already worried about experiencing discrimination as a woman in the workplace, as a black person in the workplace.
Yes.
And then I was like, I don't need me being queer to like add on more to that, especially because I work in
Yeah.
corporate situations.
Okay. Yeah.
So I was so worried about like making myself more palatable that I didn't come out to like my coworkers who, I was going to their house for drinks, we were hanging out, they're meeting my partner, and we're like changing stories about like, oh, what'd you do last weekend? And instead of saying like, oh, I went to Missy B's and we caught a drag show, I was like, oh, we went to a bar and saw a concert. And they're like, oh, which one? I'm like, oh, I don't remember the name. Just outwardly lying.
So you live you work in the corporate world. Sometimes corporations do have like LGBT focused groups within them. Have you found anything like that or?
I ended up leaving that company after a bit,
Okay.
unrelated to
Okay.
those issues. But I just didn't feel... I felt like it was very performative when I did have any type of like, oh, we support you and you're safe here. And I'm
Okay.
like, okay, I love that HR is saying that, but like, are my managers actually believing that? Are the clients believing this? If I come out, if I say something that, you know, alludes to me being queer, or even being queer aligned or supportive, can you promise me that that's not going to affect how people view me and, like, them viewing me in a workplace and my job?
Yeah.
And I just didn't feel like I was actively supported in the workplace.
And that's such a big deal. I mean, work and getting money in this capitalistic system, I mean, it's the basis of everything.
Exactly.
Especially if you're in a new place and you don't have family around, you know, a support system like that. Yeah. So that's pretty brave of you to move to another state and, you know, try and form community and all this. Where are you at with that right now, I guess?
It's gotten a lot better, actually. I'm spending a lot of time volunteering because I feel like that's the only way I know how to, like, build a community is being involved. So showing up to events, volunteering.
That's a great way to do it. I do that too because it's so easy. You just have a role and people say hi to you.
And I'm also really good at it. Like, not to toot my own horn, but like, you need a treasurer, you need somebody to plan a large scale event. Like, I'm it.
There you go.
Like this, I'm really good at it.
There you go.
If I joke that, like, you know, if I didn't have the career I had, if, like, money wasn't an object, I would just, like, run a nonprofit.
Okay.
Because I'm just really good at, like, planning and coordinating.
Well, you can run a nonprofit.
Not with this budget.
Or maybe when you're older, be on a board or something that. Yeah.
I
Totally.
mean, I'm on a council for the National Sorority.
There you go. Yeah. So you're already doing it.
Yes. Smaller scale though. I want to do it full time. I don't want to do a 9 to 5.
You seem really young, so you know, you have plenty of time.
Ideally.
Yeah. Okay. So we took a little break there, and you were talking about some of the volunteering that you're doing. And you mentioned that you hadn't really been here long enough to do a lot of activism, which makes sense. To do activism, you kind of have to have some inroads. You have to be a little bit known. You have to be trusted. That's part of the reason why my project here is sometimes a little bit difficult, because I'm coming into communities and people don't know me, right?
Yeah, I was a little nervous, honestly. At first, I was really worried. I was having second thoughts on, like, oh, what if this is one of those traps where I'm gonna be told that, like, I'm gonna get prayed over, or told that, like, my lifestyle is wrong after I, like, showed up trying to, like, open up my heart to you.
Sure, and that's happened, right? There was somebody who went around and did interviews with trans people, and then took little sound bites out of context and made a weird movie. You know, this kind of thing does happen. Yeah.
So it's really hard to want to be open, but also you're like, oh no, I want to educate, I want to tell my story.
Yeah.
But I don't want it to be taken out of context.
Right. So it's a very vulnerable space too, and you know, I'm a white guy and you're a woman of color, and you know, there's issues there as well. You know, ignorance and systemic racism that we all deal with. It's you know, awful. So yeah, I really appreciate you being here, talking to me. So what kind of volunteer work have you been doing? And then we were also thinking about talking about the paid work that you do, because you're in the medical field.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I do some local volunteering, as far as like, I volunteer for Pride each year.
Okay.
And then there is a trans-based group. I don't remember the name.
Okay.
Every now and then they have events where I'll try and make a point to go. Like the Trans Day of Visibility event with the mayor. So I went there, and then there was a protest after, which I was very excited.
I love that. I love that you turn it, like, a social event into, like, an activism event. That's
yes. So afterwards there was a protest, and my partner and I went, and we got some of our friends from... We're in a soccer supporter group, so we were like, hey, so you probably haven't heard about this, but y'all should all come. So we got some folks from the soccer group to come and, you know, hold signs and spread trans joy. And
down in Texas, in Tyler, there was a group that wanted to form. It was a trans group, and they went to a local gay group where some trans people were going, and they basically recruited.
Yes.
Yeah. So I love that. That's a good strategy.
We joke that, like, you know, we run in a lot of the same circles, so we might as well be on the same page.
Might as well, yeah. Yeah, and having focused events is also very important. So yeah, you were mentioning that you are in the medical field,
Yes.
and that's obviously a big issue right now because we're having state oppression.
Yes.
Yeah, the state is coming in and saying, people can't have access to healthcare that everybody else has access to.
Perfect.
So
yeah.
what have you noticed in your workplace and your career?
I am not a clinician. Like I'll put that out there. I'm
Yeah.
not a nurse or a doctor.
Sure.
I work in healthcare more. I'm a registered health information administrator.
Okay.
RHIA.
Okay.
So I majored in health. Sorry, let me go back a little bit.
Informatics or
Health information management.
Okay.
Let me go back a second
Sure,
because
sure.
I kind of fumbled that.
Okay.
So I am not a clinician.
Yeah.
I am not anything of that sort. I majored in health information management, and
Okay.
I got my RHIA after. So I work in the back end of healthcare.
What's RHIA?
Registered Health Information Administrator.
Okay. So you're very computer competent and you deal with all the records, and that's very important.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you have to have a good brain to understand healthcare and having
Yes.
that like clinical information. So
Mm-hmm.
like medical technology and ICD-10 coding and healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
But being able to put that in context of like business and administration.
Right. And the insurance companies.
Yes.
And yeah, what a mess.
Yeah.
Good on you. You sound like you're a very organized person, so you're probably perfect for that.
I really liked it. I realized that I love learning about healthcare,
Okay.
but I didn't want to be
Sure.
like a clinical person because I don't think I have the people skills for it.
Okay. Well, you seem pretty personable to me, but
You're not sick. As soon as you're sick, I'm like, ooh.
Okay. But you're obviously very good with computers, and that's really important. Somebody like me, I can't even deal. No way. Making little what do they call them?
PowerPoint
Programs, and where you're mining the data, and I don't want to do that. I'm like caveman style. Click on it. Yeah, totally. Yeah, you laugh at me.
It's okay. I didn't know any of it either.
I laugh at me too.
I didn't know anything about it. They taught me all of it in school.
Yeah,
Shout out
great.
to all of the great teachers out there.
That's great. Yeah, totally. So, in my, being a trans person, I started out quite a while ago, and they never used like terms like trans on the actual intake forms. They didn't give you any other choice except for male and female. They didn't put like a preferred name box or anything like that. And it was really fraught actually with danger for us because it could mean the difference between having insurance coverage or not. Or also we were worried about being put on like lists of various sorts, like for being a trans person and being discriminated against and that sort of thing. And I was wondering from your perspective as somebody who deals with that sort of information, like kind of like what you've seen.
So I feel like there's been a big shift in making sure intake forms or things like that are more inclusive.
Sure.
It's something very small that clinics can do I feel like very often providers say, oh, I want to be a safe space. I want this. I'm going to give good quality, accepting care.
That's their intention.
And then they're not doing the base needs. And it's coming from a good place. They're just not well educated, or they're not listening to queer people when they say, this is what we need.
Sure.
But that has really shifted over the last couple of years. A lot more places are having other options. And you can always have an other option on your form.
Yeah.
Let people self-identify.
Just
it's
the other
easy.
box. Yeah.
Yeah, write it in.
Other. Yeah, right.
And that's been a huge step forward. And I know it can get kind of murky with data, especially on our side, because say that we have a patient and we're seeing that half of the forms mention them as male and half mention them as female, and so we want to do what's proper in the sense of like, okay, what's going to get their insurance covered?
Yeah.
What legally can we put? But also, like, if there's a different name, okay, well, now we have systems that, like, we have your legal name, gross, from, like, insurance perspective that we have to keep.
Yeah.
But we can put your preferred name in, and so your providers know that's what you should be called.
Right. When they pull up the screen and they see that, they see, oh, this is what I need to address this person as.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because otherwise, it's almost like a form of gatekeeping.
Exactly.
Because I if I were to go into a clinic and they would call me by my birth name, for instance, maybe I wouldn't even recognize that they were calling for me because I haven't used that name for so long. And I would really wonder if it was a safe space for me. Yeah. And I will tell you that actually happened recently. And it maybe has to do with the information, because trans people often have records that are different.
Yes.
Federal records can be different from state records, can be different from, medical records. I mean, there's kind of a mixture sometimes, and that has to do with different laws. So my federal records are different from state records. So, yeah.
And it can be disheartening, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And providers, oftentimes they don't know they don't know what's proper, because if you're seeing these documentations and you don't know, okay, well, there is a traditionally feminine name and a traditionally masculine name.
Yeah.
I don't know which one came first.
Right.
So I don't want to make assumptions, and making assumptions is what leads us to feeling hurt.
Yes.
So if we take away that and let people identify themselves, we don't have those gray areas of being like, ooh, I don't want to just pick one because I don't want to pick the wrong one.
And it doesn't take much to just ask somebody.
Exactly.
I mean, that should be kind of the first question, I will tell you, I've had the experience the other way too. I went into a clinic and saw a doctor, and they thought I was going the other way. They thought that I was looking to transition the other way to female. Yeah, I know.
It happens.
I know.
Be surprised how often that happens.
I know. A lot of trans men that I've talked to have had that experience. In fact, the doctor looked at me and was like, "Oh, you're looking really good." I'm not sure what they meant by that, but okay. All right.
I had something similar happen. I was bringing my now fiance, but then partner, to meet my aunt for the first time.
Okay.
And I gave the spiel before.
Was this in Louisiana?
Yes.
Okay.
And my aunt was super accepting. She just didn't. She wasn't well educated, but she was you tell me whatever I need to say.
Sure.
To make sure that
she's trying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She got it flipped though. And so the whole dinner, she's misgendering my partner. And I'm feeling so embarrassed. And also kind of hurt because I was like, Nana, what? Why would you do this? And halfway through the dinner, she pulls me aside and we're cleaning dishes.
Sure.
And she's like, oh, did I do it right? I slipped up once and called her him. And I was like, Jan, did you get this confused?
Oh, yeah.
And then she realized that she had been misgendering. She had thought my partner was a trans woman instead of a trans man the whole dinner.
Yes.
And thought she was doing so good.
Right. Yeah, because you can't assume from how somebody looks what their gender identity is. So actually she came from a place that was really innocent and trying really hard.
Oh, she was trying so hard. And it's funny looking back on it. And it all worked out in the end.
Yeah, that's cool. And, a mistake like that is, it's so forgivable. Because it's obviously, met with love. She was trying really hard. So, that's great. Yeah. So what other kinds of things have you seen? So you've seen kind of an evolution of the paperwork as somebody's coming into a clinic?
Yeah. Besides the evolution of paperwork, just the evolution of providers and the mindset has been tremendous.
What created that situation where there was a change, do you think?
I don't know. I feel like I can give a great example for one provider.
Okay.
So in the middle of nowhere, Louisiana.
Sure.
Very small town with 4 streets. There's a provider who gives gender affirming care. Okay. He is a regular schmegular.
Good on ya.
Family practice doctor who would, most people go in for a cold or I need medicine for anything else. Right. He had a
general
practitioner. General practitioner. And family practice, yeah. So he had a patient come in a couple years back saying hey doc, I need hormones. Here's here's the situation. I'm well versed in it. Here's everything. And the doctor was like, no, I don't do that. You'll have to find someone else. There's someone else who knows more about this who could probably help you. And the patient said, listen, I can be on a wait list and drive 3.5 hours to New Orleans. Right. And I won't be able to get an appointment for another 6 months. Right. Or I'd have to go to Texas or maybe drive up to Shreveport. Right. And the doctor was like, no, that can't be right. There has to be someone in Lafayette that can do that for you. Yeah. Nothing without a year-long wait list, nothing. Sure. And the doctor was appalled and was like, all right, no, I'll do it.
Yeah.
He started taking the lessons, brushed up on some skills to make sure that he was well versed.
And clinicians do that all the time. Mm-hmm. They do that all the time. They have to do continuing education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he brushed up on those skills, made sure that like he was well versed in everything.
Yeah.
And now he has been the person who prescribed hormones for all of my friends, all of like my partner, like, so he has been a staple in the queer community in South Louisiana.
What a blessing that somebody took their role so seriously and educated themselves. I mean, that's great. That's
and
great.
He's also the only one who does informed consent.
Okay.
The way he looks at it is, if you're willing to drive through sugarcane fields for an hour to come to St. Martinville, you know what you're about.
Okay.
I'm not going to make you jump through a bunch of hoops that are unnecessary. You're going to do, like, if you want this, I'm going to do what's legally required.
Yeah. And that's a justice issue as well, because most of the time trans people have been thinking about this for a really long time. It's a medication. You doctors will tell you, or nurse practitioners will tell you what the medications do, you know, what the side effects are, and then you may make your decision about that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's great. And yeah, I'm going to confirm that even in big cities like Austin, Houston, and whatnot, you go to clinics and wait lists are months and months, if not years sometimes, to get care. Yeah.
And part of the problem, at least in Louisiana, was a lot of the clinics that were doing it were like more locally, like nonprofit type of. And so it was like, oh, you know, Acadiana Cares. Great, but their wait list is a year and a half.
Okay.
They only have so many providers who can help, and you know, this is all that they can do, and they're doing great work, but we need more providers who are willing to give good care.
And also general practitioners.
Yes.
Because there's more to healthcare with trans people than just hormones and just surgery and therapy. It's everything. You know, let's look at the whole person there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Great. Have you seen any, or have you participated in any, like, sort of trainings by local activists and that sort of thing? Because I know activists who go into those settings and they're recognized as experts, you know, in trans issues, and they will often give trainings.
Yes and no. So I have experienced no very specific like activists come in, but as far as like, we do like regular trainings at my work on different issues, so we've had trainings of that sort. But I've also I've talked on panels to medical students in Kansas City.
Okay, you've done that yourself.
Yes.
Okay, great.
It was.
So you're in that role.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
So my background is mostly like in queer history, in queer experiences, but especially from a lens of like being a person of color.
Yes. Right.
And I feel like because I'm very white passing, I have a unique position of being able to see a lot of racism that wouldn't normally be directed at me.
Right.
So like in healthcare spaces, I'll be, you know, I worked as an intern someplace and somebody said some very vulgar comments about a patient or about somebody else to me, thinking that I, presenting as a white woman, so they assumed I was a white woman, would agree with them or laugh with them, and being in the situation to be like, oh, this is awful, and not knowing how to navigate that. And also in queer settings, I've had that happen because I'm pretty straight passing as well.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. I've had that experience as a man, like other men saying disgusting things to me about women, and I'm like, no, I'm a feminist, you know? Yeah, it's really... Yeah, uncomfortable. I'm gonna actually close this because it's like beaming down on me. It's like a little bit much. Okay, there we go. All right. I don't need God's spotlight down on me yet. Okay, so and there's also, so that's kind of in-person training, and you've kind of done that before. Also in the corporate world, there's kind of like these modules. Yeah. Sometimes I've been through those as a university TA, for instance, as a graduate teacher. And I find them rather crude. It's kind of like more about what you can get away with than like being kind or being respectful. Yeah.
I am fortunate enough to work in a place that our modules are pretty good.
Okay, good.
Especially since the place I work part of our services is gender affirming care. So although I am not in a department that works very closely with that, the education...
So you actually do gender affirming care in the place that you're...
Yes.
That you work.
I work for like a region, so some of our like clinics do this. So it's...
Are they specific clinics, like clinic night? This is when we're very welcoming of trans people.
More of a... So let's say there's 20 clinics, and they span across a handful of states. This clinic can do this. It has like the resources. So we're going to indicate that like these 5 clinics are going to be the ones that like always specialize in this. Since they have more resources in those areas.
How is that... You were mentioning earlier that you would hope that a lot of general practitioners would be competent, which is hard. That's a very slow process. It's also a very slow process for being competent in terms of ethnicity, right? There's in terms of class, about you realizing poverty, what poverty does to people, what racism does to people. And so when you have clinics that are focused, how then do you spread that knowledge out? Is that a good example that people can point to? Or
I think what I always tell people is it's not a one-stop all. You know, you can't go to one training and be like, that's it, I'm an ally, I'm officially a trans ally, I've done it, I did my little seminar.
Right.
It's a continuous thing. You know, if so, my resume would be phenomenal.
Yeah, right. I can put that down on my CV now. I've went through that training. Okay, well, it's a little more than that.
That's just step
You will
one.
Still make mistakes, trust me.
Yeah, and mistakes are okay. Yeah. Mistakes are saying, oh, you've acknowledged that you recognize you made a mistake, and you're willing to do better.
Yeah, it's awful when people don't acknowledge their mistakes. That's the bad part.
So trainings, there's information out there. We have this phenomenal thing called the internet, where if you want resources, you can get them.
Right.
So you just have to be willing to maybe shift through a couple of pages, find good resources, honestly.
Yeah.
But it's not an impossible task.
Right.
This isn't anything that we could do today that we're not asking our queer and trans folks from small towns to do.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you think my Catholic grandmother sat me down and explained, like, hey, trans rights are important. No, I had to sit her down and explain that.
Right.
You know, I didn't wake up one day knowing, the difference between trans women and trans men and how hormones affect the body and the limited access, or how queerness and transness coincide, or how intersex people experience life.
Yeah.
I had to learn all of this.
I know, and through this project, I'll tell you what, I've been learning a lot. So I feel like before I was super ignorant, before I even started this project. Yeah.
Oh, you should look up Pigeon Pagones. They are a intersex activist.
Okay.
I had the honor of hearing them speak at Louisiana Queer Conference back in 2018, 2019. And it just opened my eyes because I realized that I had been looking at like the queer umbrella as like gay men, queer women, and like trans folks, and those were like the very like cut and dry blocks that I was looking at it, and like our experiences and how they related to each other, but like they were very different. And then it was a very humbling experience realizing like, oh, intersex people are in our community sometimes and they're not other times, and we need to acknowledge them and learn their history.
Right. And some trans people are straight.
And like realizing that I still had a lot of learning to do, even at that point where I was an activist, where I was a leader, where I was doing public speaking.
Right.
And I was like, oh, this is humbling, and this shows that if I didn't realize how much of an issue this is, other people don't either, and I need to be like more mindful of like giving that
because you're
stage.
right on the edge, because you are an activist and you're well educated, and you yourself do trainings. So I love it that you bring up that word humility, that you have a sense of being humble, that there's more to learn. I love that.
You never stop learning.
Right.
You always have to do. It doesn't always have to be more trainings, but sitting like what you're doing right now, learning about my experience as a queer person from nowhere, Louisiana.
Right.
Sorry, I almost
cussed. Nowhere, Louisiana. Well, you can cuss actually, because I actually encourage people to do that, because YouTube and other platforms will not put ads on this.
Oh, because I was gonna say I'm from bumfuck Louisiana,
I'm
and then I was like,
that.
oh wait,
I'm totally fine with that. it's the videos where they beep it out. Those people are looking for monetization. I'm not. So.
Oh, okay.
So it's totally fine. No, it's great though. I'm so glad that you're telling me, for instance, about this small town doctor, and the difference between, the regions, and yeah, it's so great. So how do you think we should round out this interview? What else should we be talking about? What's important to talk about?
I could talk about me. I love talking about me.
Sure.
So it all started when I was born.
You're funny.
No, I feel like...
And you say you're not personable or sociable or whatever.
I feel like I have a personality that I can read people well and know what they're gonna like.
Okay.
And it makes me more palatable.
Oh, are you kind of a mimic a little bit?
Yeah. Oh, I mimic all the time.
Okay, all right.
I have a bad tendency to match accents.
Oh, I do too.
And that's why I don't have like a very thick Cajun accent anymore, because I moved from Louisiana and I was like, no, I can't let anyone know that like.
Sure. No, I understand. When I lived in Texas, I refused to say y'all. Because I was more urban. I was not going to say y'all.
You were like, oh, I'm too cool for this.
I know. But then I moved to Seattle, and I was saying y'all all the time. Because people in Seattle were not that friendly.
Oh, I feel like I do that. I never really spoke like in any like Cajun French like slang. And then moving up here, I'm like, me goddamn dog all the time.
That's hilarious.
And I'm like, oh.
That's hilarious.
I went 20 years without ever wanting to listen to Zydeco music, and now I'm like, I miss home. Let's put on some.
Yes. Well, there's something to that, though. If it's on all the time, it's like, oh, please, can I listen to something else,
Yeah.
Yeah, but then you move somewhere else, and it's like, oh, I miss that. Like I moved from Alaska, and I was like, oh, now I miss the snow, and I actually miss the cold,
I can't relate. First time I saw snow was when I moved here.
Oh, really? Okay. What are the winters like here? Because I'm imagining, Louisiana's pretty hot, and it's like...
Very humid.
It's very swampy and humid, yeah.
Fun fact, my college actually has a swamp in it. So, one of my first dates was around the swamp. My partner and I are actually getting married at the swamp on our college campus next year.
What do you do in a swamp? I have no idea.
So they're beautiful. If you haven't seen one, it's just nature being around. So some people go into the swamps and will kayak or paddleboard. I'm more of a...
Do they go fishing and stuff?
Oh yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Depending on the area.
Sure. The
swamp on our college campus was a man-made swamp, so it's more of a, you sit on the benches and you look over and you watch the gator swim, or you say, oh, look, that turtle.
So it's very manicured because it's on a campus. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Totally. Yeah. I went to Florida at some point, and it was kind of a mix. There were, off the highway, people would be fishing into kind of a swampy, literally standing on the highway and fishing, which I thought was cool. And then you go into more developed areas, and there'd be little ponds, and there'd be alligators and stuff in them. Yeah. And I was not used to that because I had to keep my dog away from the water,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and snakes and stuff. We don't have that up in Alaska, so yeah.
Oh, yeah. Y'all probably don't have bugs neither. Huh?
No, we don't have ticks. We don't have rats. We don't have anything like that.
Y'all don't have rats?
No.
Okay, so this has nothing to do with the interview, but
people do not believe me, but we do not have rats.
After the interview, look up what a rat is.
Okay. No, those are really big, right?
Yeah.
Those are big, water rats. Yeah.
Yeah, they're an invasive species.
All we have are these little tiny things called voles, and they're kind of like mice. They're like little, only they have short little tails.
Are those the ones that are... No, that's mole.
No, these are voles. They're like little mice, and they're very cute, but they have short little tails, and they just...
Weird. That's so cool.
If somebody has a garden, it'll ruin your garden, but...
Oh, that's unfortunate.
No, but they're sweet. I like them. So, anyway.
I love learning about different places.
Yeah, we have 9 months of, winter.
Well, you'll have to send me a postcard.
Okay, I'll definitely do that. It's probably have gold on it or something, because Fairbanks is basically a mine.
But, interesting.
Yeah, that's the history of it. Yeah. So, we were thinking about how we're going to round out this interview, because I have another one next. And you were mentioning that in your hometown in Louisiana, where you were going to college, that that you had kind of a special house there. So let's talk about that a little bit.
So I had a little rental house. We called it the Vermilion House, or the Drunken Jalapeno.
Is that like the name of it? The Vermilion House?
No, we just lived on Vermilion Street.
Oh, okay.
So we were like, yes, the Vermilion House.
Okay. Well, it's a nice name.
And so it was me and a roommate of mine who's a lesbian and my partner who's trans. And it kind of just became like the spot because I was so involved in activism. And my partner's trans and was really involved in LTA. And we basically just...
What's LTA again?
Louisiana Trans Advocates.
Okay. All right.
So we basically just like became the spot for people to hang out. So we'd have like cookouts and parties.
All right.
But it was always super queer. And I loved it. We would have house parties to fundraise for my partner's top surgery.
Oh, great.
So
I love how this community does that, by the way. Mutual aid.
Oh, yes.
And they ask for help and they give help. Yes.
So we would have these huge parties, we'd cook, and we'd have a little tip jar by the door. And so it became a running joke that there was never any like cis people, or never any cis het people in our house. So we'd have these parties and everyone had to like donate what they could to Ashton's top surgery. But you had to pay double if you were cis het.
Okay. All right.
So we'd always be like, bring your straight friends, because we never know any straight people.
Okay. That's funny.
And we made sure that everyone had name tags with pronoun pins. And so it became an educational experience for a lot of our friends. Like, oh yeah, I'm going to bring like my brother who's in a frat, and he's going to bring his frat bros. So a bunch of frat bros helped pay for my partner's top surgery.
So once again, you're turning a social event into activism.
I guess.
That's a theme here. I like that.
So yeah, it was really fun. We would do a lot of our like org planning, especially because COVID happened. So we would do a lot of our org planning in like our backyard. So a lot of those events that happened on UL's campus.
Sure.
You know, the planning stages were in Vermilion's house backyard.
Okay. The hotbed of queer activism.
Yeah. And then anything from, somebody went to the doctor in St. Martinville but they didn't know how to give their shots.
Okay.
Or they felt like, the nurse taught me once, but I'm too scared to do it again.
Right. Or some people also have fear of needles.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, we had impromptu lessons.
Okay.
My roommate was a nurse.
DIY.
Yeah. And she was like, all right, you guys, like, we could do this. We have the materials. Like, you need to learn how to do this yourself.
Right.
Because for a while, a mutual friend was coming over every week for his weekly shot because he was like, I don't know if I can do it because he was doing it in his rear.
Yeah.
So he was like, I'm not sure if I can reach. And so she basically like worked him up to getting the confidence to be able to give himself a shot.
Was that IM or was that just beneath the skin, subcutaneous?
He just switched, and I can't remember what he switched to.
Okay.
Because I remember he didn't like whatever he was doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the subcutaneous has to be done more often, but supposedly it makes you more even in terms of the hormones in your body. I have been doing IM forever, though, like for, since 2000. And so I've literally given myself hundreds of shots, and so it is something that somebody does have to learn, because otherwise you have to go in and get a nurse to do it or something, or a friend who's, very versed in this stuff,
I'm trying to remember, because we were just talking about it the other day, because he was thinking about switching, or maybe he switched and that was the nurse like didn't have a lot of experience, or they didn't have a lot of experience doing that. It
requires a different needle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And frequency and a different dose.
I'll have to ask him, because I know he switched.
And then some people use gels and that sort of thing, and the gels have gotten better.
They're becoming way more popular, but I find it funny that, so like, I base queerness on a map that trends tend to go like in the community of like, I don't know a lot of guys who were on gel who were like in the Acadiana region, but there was a doctor who was more open to prescribing it in New Orleans.
Well, it used to be that, I don't know what it's like now, but it used to be more expensive to go on a gel. And then there was, that was the good gel. The bad gel is what I went on for a while, and it never quite dried. It was really sticky, and it would get all over your clothing. Yeah, but it was a cheaper version. But now they have really good gels, because one of the, because cisgendered men are taking more testosterone, they're making the healthcare delivery actually a little bit better.
Better products.
Right, and they're doing a little bit more research, too, which is good, so that benefits trans people a little bit.
I mean, cisgender people have always gotten gender-affirming care.
Right, exactly. exactly.
So it's nothing new.
Yeah,
but
in Texas, I was seeing like in billboards, basically about enhancement of various things and ED and hormone prescriptions, everything. You can hear it on the radio all the time. So
yeah, it's it's kind of funny, and I think I'm not sure if it's as common anymore, but like I do a lot in like queer history of just like researching because I'm very interested in it.
Yeah,
and like the terms that we use has always like kind of been different by region.
Okay.
So like self-IDing is a very like personal thing, and I'm not gonna like say that people can't use certain terms, but like in Lafayette we would joke that like this was a house you could ID yourself anyway. So for the longest time, like now I identify as queer, but I've always like mostly identified as a dyke.
Sure.
And that just felt like stronger and safer. And
when I was younger, I called myself a dyke. It's a great word. It's very powerful.
Well, it was also one of the only like slurs that ever like really hurt me. So I was like, if I can get over this,
sure.
If I'm calling myself like a dyke, diner dyke was I worked at a breakfast diner.
Okay.
So if I can call myself a diner dyke, and
you must be a really tough dyke then, because working at diners is sometimes a little rough. Like I've known people who've worked at Waffle House, and you have to have MMA training or something.
I actually worked at a Waffle House and a local diner at the same time because the hours were better.
Okay.
So I was like, if I can do this and like I can make this word feel good and reclaim it, then like I can handle anything somebody's gonna call me.
Yeah.
What's the worst they can say? Call me a dyke. I already do that.
And every person who calls himself a dyke, I like. I mean, pretty much. Lesbians, it can be hit or miss there.
So. Okay, you might have to cut this out.
Okay.
Because I swear...
Oh, here's the good stuff.
This is going to sound like I'm a chaser.
Okay.
And I promise I'm not. And I have to disclose.
Okay.
So I identified as a lesbian or like sometimes bisexual, but like mostly a lesbian when I was trying to come to terms with myself.
Sure.
Figuring out. And, that's fair. The problem I kept having was I kept dating people who, after we would start dating, would come out. And I was like, 4 times!
Okay.
And I was like, hey, so I don't have a problem with you being trans. It's not a deal breaker for me. But it makes it look like I'm seeking out trans men, and this is kind of...
No. I know what you're talking about, though, and actually that is a sore spot in the community, because trans people are often, like...
over-fetishized, yes.
Fetishized from the outside, and it can be terrible. It actually kept me from dating for a long time, because all the people I kept meeting for a while...
were either, grossed out, or they were way too into it.
Yeah, they were kind of, like, plowing past who I was. Like, they really didn't want to get to know me. So it was rough. So that is a sore spot for some people. But you don't sound like you're doing that at all.
No, it was just a weird coincidence that keeps happening.
You just know what you like.
Yeah. Well, in my defense, I always say, like, at this point, I was just really attracted to, like, masculine presenting people and, like, more butch folks.
Yes.
And then we'd start dating or talking, and then later on, they'd be like, oh, hey, actually, not... Like,
and they were attracted to you, too.
And then they would come out later on. Like, my partner and I were together for a year and a half before he transitioned. And I was like, not a deal breaker. I mean, we're getting married next year. So, like, obviously not a deal breaker.
Yeah.
But...
Oh, great. You're getting married.
Yes, wonderful. I'm very excited.
Awesome.
But I'm like, at this point, it seems like I'm a chaser.
I bet you're doing some good planning for that, aren't you?
No, honestly. It's kind of the worst.
Okay.
I like planning other people's events.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot of gender expectations with wedding that I'm not sure how I feel about.
How are you dealing with that? That's an issue, too.
I'm making it work. There are a lot of like traditions that I'm not sure if I'm comfortable with, and so I'm trying to like go through and be like, oh, what do I like? What do I not like?
And there's also, is it a civil wedding or a religious wedding? And
I'm not allowed to have a religious
wedding.
Yeah. So it was something I had to come to terms with because most of my family's Catholic, and like religion is a big part of my partner's family, and us not being able to get married in a church was really hard on them. I didn't care either way.
I bet. Yeah.
But I think they were kind of hurt by that.
Yeah, I bet.
And then my partner's family can be a bit much at times, and so they're still struggling with accepting his identity, and so seeing him as the groom.
Not quite there yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I'm not sure if they'll be there in time. So that's kind of hard. Like being a partner and loving him so deeply, and knowing that he wants his parents there to see him, be a groom.
Right.
And I'm not sure if they're going to be able to do that because they still expect their child to be a bride.
Are they going to come to the wedding?
As of now, yes.
Okay.
That could change in the future, depending on... That's up to them on how they act.
Yeah. Well, you have some time. I hope that works out. Yeah. Or at least they don't, disrupt.
It's their loss if not. I'm not stressed over it either way.
Yeah. It's your day. It's your day. Right. Yeah. And how are you dealing with the gender expectations? Since you're gender diverse, like you were saying earlier.
It's kind of difficult.
Yeah.
At times. There are certain...
And you have long braids.
Yeah. I
wear jewelry. Mm-hmm.
I realize that I don't mind dressing femme. I don't mind presenting as femme.
Yeah.
But I know that this is a default. I feel safe in this, and I'm not sure if this is something I necessarily... Like, this is who I am all the time.
Yeah.
I like dressing more masculine or more like a stud at points. But I feel like the people who have been, praised in that are people who don't look like me. Mm-hmm. People who aren't curvy, they're more androgynous, and they're usually white. Mm-hmm. And it makes me feel like, oh, I'm not doing this right. Like, it doesn't look good on me. Or often I don't feel safe.
I'm sorry you have all those fears. That's a lot of fears around that. Yeah.
And then...
And I hear you about the body shape. And, yeah, totally.
And, not knowing... oh, okay, am I just going to read as a tomboy? Which is fine. That's not... But, is this going to be cute? Is this going to be acceptable? Also, people like me more when they think I'm pretty. And being pretty has equated to, self-worth and value. And it holds a
and
really
access.
deep...
And,
really deep weight, especially in the Deep South, where I, have always been told, not overtly by my family because they were very great by giving me education and telling me I could do anything, but it was very oh, get a husband, be someone who is likable, be somebody who's pretty, be someone that other people like to be around, and that is somebody effeminate. So, I toyed with the idea of wearing a suit at our wedding, and while I'm not sure, I'm probably going to go with a dress, I feel like one of the reasons is it's more acceptable. I'm not going to get a second look. Nobody's going to, leave the service and talk about me if I conform in the way they want. Okay.
But remember, it is your day.
Yeah, but I don't mind wearing the dress.
And also, there's different kinds of suits. Yeah, and and through this project, I've certainly met a lot of people who are sort of in between, how I would call that, who are not on the ends of the spectrum in terms of gender identity, who, they really mix it up, and they really do it for themselves. And I just adore them. I gotta say, I really, really, really adore them. They really celebrate, themselves. And, it's hard. It's a hard place to get to. It's a really hard place to get to. And, you say that you're not, you're more adjacent to the trans community, but you're really experiencing an essential part of what trans people go through. The aspect of, is their body going to conform to people's expectations? Is, are they pretty enough? Are they handsome enough, in their role, or, dealing with family and all that stuff. So you're experiencing a deep part of that. Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to say about that, or did I say something that upset you? Or
no, I'm thinking of a friend of mine told me recently that cis people don't think this hard about their gender. Yeah. And it's something that's resonated with me for years. And just, the idea of, I feel like oftentimes there are very, strict boxes. And especially now that, the trans community is being under a bigger highlight. Yeah. In good and in bad ways.
And things are dangerous.
Yeah. That I'm not sure where I fit in. in that community,
Yeah.
or if I fit in that community.
Okay.
Because also there are a lot of expectations that trans people have. Because
Yeah.
if I wanted to start saying like, oh, I think I'm non-binary, or there's an expectation of what that looks like.
Sure.
And I'm not really gonna make a lot of changes. I know myself well enough. I'm not interested in hormones or any reassignments.
Yeah.
I'm maybe just have a little more freedom in like my dress wear, but for the most part, in queer spaces, I feel safe enough to dress how I want.
Yeah. I'm glad that you brought up the word freedom, because that's really what it's about. Your own expression, your own personal freedom. It doesn't have to, like, even like you just said, non-binary sometimes even has its own expectations about
tremendously
about what that looks like. Yeah. I hear you. Sometimes, like I was just saying, we default to, the binary has its expectations, but all those identities sometimes do, whether they're femme or butch or dyke or non-binary, any in between. I think that's what I like about the young people coming up with their own language. People complain about that all the time, like older people, like
they're like, we had 4 terms and you're gonna stick with it.
I know. But those terms don't fit. They don't fit. It's just like I would never call myself gay, for instance. Even if I date men, I would still have more of a queer identity, but people are coming up with all kinds of new terms, and I really love it. At first I was resistant, and I got to admit that, but I love it now, because it really communicates what people are, where they're coming from.
I also feel like there's a big generational gap, and I've talked about this again, where I feel like older queer folks had like, here are very specific terms and here's what we're going to stick with, and then the generation after them, like,
they had to be firm about that.
Yes,
right,
because
I'm queer, I'm gay,
and there wasn't a way to really communicate, so you needed like very few things that were succinct that anyone could know. And then the generation after, and I call it like the Tumblr era generation, that was kind of my age, where
I don't even know what Tumblr is, but
we had like micro labels where like there was a word for everything, and if you didn't feel like you fit in one of these like demi labels or like micro labels, you got to like find a community that made a new one. So there are hundreds of different words, and then the generation after them, I guess like the Gen Z, like my younger sisters, they're more of a generation or the mindset of like, labels don't matter, I don't care, like I don't need a word for what I am or how I feel, where I was like, oh no, I have to know the exact word, because otherwise it's not real, like I'm not going to be accepted, or it's not valid unless I have a word to put to it, whereas they're like, who cares about the language used? I like this, or I don't like this, or my gender's this, and like there is not such a heavy like preface on labels for them, and I love that. That is the case. That some people are like, oh, whatever labels, I can just say queer, or I could just say trans, or something like that, or non-binary, and they don't have to be more specific. But like we were saying earlier, sometimes assumptions can be made. If you aren't specific, then you're put into a particular community or identity, or there can be expectations put on you. So actually, I really do like it. I wish for some of these terms to be used more often. I think people would feel more connected too. Like, for instance, the asexual community or intersex. Like, there's so much silence around those identities and preferences. So I think it would just be helpful, But I understand why people are like, I'm just queer, Yeah, I mean, I guess to a point. I guess because I fixated so long on like feeling like, I joke that like each label was like a sweater, and some like were too big and some were too small, so I needed something that just felt right. Sure, queer felt right.
Yeah, and it's broad. Yeah, it can mean a lot of things.
Yeah. When people are like, "What?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm queer." Like, my little T-shirt for the day.
The future is queer. There you go. Awesome. Yeah, and that's probably a good place to end. Future is queer. Do you have any plans for the future besides obviously the big one, getting married and all that?
Oh goodness, I don't know. The trans joy picnic today.
Yeah. Oh yeah, let's talk about that.
I don't know too much about it, honestly. So my partner and I.
So you're not going as an organizer?
No.
Awesome.
I'm just going as a supporter.
Yep.
So my partner and I, we have a plan to like grow our community here.
Okay.
Is we each go separate ways.
Okay.
And then we like, okay, if we each make a community and then we invite the other one, then we'll both have communities.
Oh.
So, and also because Ashton's...
That's really smart in terms of having a relationship, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, because then you just have a bigger community, and it's not just based on you having a relationship.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, since my partner's trans, he's doing a lot more work in the trans community.
Okay.
And in fact, there's very early stages of a trans like summer camp that's coming up, like for adults. And I think he's gonna be like the head chef or like the kitchen manager. I might volunteer as like somebody to carry ice or like whatever they need. But
do they rent out like a state park or something, or?
I think they rent out like a cabin area. They told me that the details that they've finalized so far is that it's going to be at the end of July, and that they have an area that used to be like a summer camp for like a church or something like that some other people bought, and then those folks said like, oh hey, yeah, you can use this, we just rent it out to whoever.
And so sometimes old scouting camps are
I think it's something like that.
Yeah.
So they're gonna set up there. I don't know all the details yet.
I love those kind of events. I love it.
Yeah, I know I'm gonna go.
You get privacy, and it's safe, and you can, if you want to take your shirt off or whatever, and yeah, totally. I hope to go to events like that. Alaska, we don't have a lot of that kind of stuff, but who knows? Maybe I can.
Well, this is going to be the first summer that my partner can swim.
Oh,
he just had his surgery this spring, so like this summer we are doing everything. We're going to every pool party, every beach.
All right. Is there a lot of those kind of events, like people have like house parties and stuff?
I assume so. We're still new to the community.
Okay. Yeah.
So we would have like queer-based things back home where we would have trans pool parties.
Well, you were the Vermilion house. I mean,
we didn't have a pool, but we knew other people, so we were like, okay, we need to go to like a place where we know that everyone, top surgery or not, will be safe and will be comfortable.
And that's very important. Yeah. Yeah. And I've also met trans women who've also gone to pool parties, and it was the first time they'd been in like a bikini. Yeah, exactly.
So like having the freedom to like not, and because that's really vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine how scary or stressful that can be, and not knowing like, hey, is there going to be some ass at the pool who's going to like try and harass me?
Right. Yeah, and it's such a beautiful day. It's probably going to be a great party. I'm envious.
You should come. I think it's like just a picnic in the like in front of the museum.
Yeah, I have another interview, and then since I'm doing 3 today, I'm going to be
wiped.
Yeah, I'm going to be totally exhausted because I'm actually a very shy, introverted kind of person. So like a lot of talking and contact, I'm like, huh.
I imagine it takes a lot of energy.
So me and my dog are just going to go for a walk or something, so. Anyway, thank you so much for meeting with me. You're so vibrant and fancy. Frankly, I mean, yeah,
thank you.
You're like super fancy. I love your your style, your big earrings and stuff, and your hair and your tattoos. Actually, I want to see that side one there.
This one was done by a queer artist in Louisiana named Poby.
Yeah.
And this one was my first queer tattoo. It was gonna say dyke, and then I chickened out.
Okay.
But I wanted something to represent, like, queer women, and then also, like, equality. So the black triangle was used to persecute, to mark queer women and, like, unwanted women during the Holocaust.
Unwanted women.
So
wow.
That was a slight memorial to them.
Yes. And what is this one? It looks like fruit.
So remember that queer house party I talked about? One of the things was a friend of mine had tattoo markers and was doing for like $5 to fundraise. Was doing like little like mini tattoos, and so he drew a grapefruit on my arm, and that was the first moment that I like stood in the mirror, and I had a shaved head at this point, and I was like, this is it, like this is queer joy. And I look back at this photo of me like flexing in the mirror with my little doodled grapefruit.
Yeah.
And I wanted something to like remember that moment forever, so then I went and got an actual tattoo of the grapefruit, and then we added blackberries later on.
Yeah, and flowers. And
Oh yeah, well these are the blossoms for each of the fruit.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So it's kind of the life cycle of the fruit.
Okay. Yeah. Very fruity. Very clear.
I imagine I'll get more in the future, but
I'm a little dorky, sorry.
It's It's okay.
I don't have any tattoos, but I'm one of those people that I'm like, oh, look at your tattoo. Anyway, thank you so much for meeting with me. I can tell that you've been quite vulnerable, and you've brought up some really cool issues that other people haven't brought up in my project here. And I so appreciate too that you're a woman of color and you brought up issues around that. Someone like me, I'm going to be ignorant about that, so I really appreciate that. It's it's a risk. So.
Well, thank you for giving me the space
Yeah.
and for being so kind and willing to like hear my stories and laugh with me.
Yeah, and we're making do. We're here in the RV and we've stacked stuff up, but we did it.
Oh yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing about the continued work you're going to be doing. All right. Until next time.